Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, let's talk about the southern part of Ukraine. During the previous 12 hours, the pro-Russian resources published this video, where we can see how Russians, as a result of reconnaissance operation, managed to discover a position or facility that Ukrainians used to produce drones, and the Russians attacked this facility immediately with the Iskander missile. This plant was located on the territory of the city of Kherson. The Russians are saying that a very huge factory was completely damaged and destroyed by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the Poltavka and Uspienovka fortified areas. And as you can see, according to the map, we see that the Russians during the previous 12 hours managed to improve their positions once again. So this is the situation by the end of the 7th of October of 2025. The Russians just finished the battle for the settlement of Novovasilievskaya. This information was confirmed by the video and by the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. And today we got additional update from different mappers that the Russians moved even further and managed to improve their positions along the river of Yanchul. So this is the situation by the morning of the 8th of October of 2025. The Russians, as we can see, began advancing in the direction of Poltavka from the southeastern part. The Russians managed to establish complete control over the eastern part of the village of Poltavka, according to neutral mappers, and the Russians began outflanking the settlement of Poltavka from its central part, trying to cut the southern from the main part of the Poltavka fortified area. Furthermore, the Russians, as we can see, improved their positions between the Poltavka and Uspienovka fortified territories areas by taking under control additional fields and tree lines. So this is the situation by the morning of the 8th of October. Most likely the Russians will try to cross the river of Yanchul with the purpose to answer this tree line and then to begin moving further in the western direction with the purpose to capture this stronghold between these two fortified areas. This will allow the Russians to block the Poltavka fortified area from supply and support and then to finish the battle for this territory. And right after this, the Russians will focus their attention on the territory of settlement by the name of Uspienovka. Furthermore, according to neutral mappers and according to pro-Ukraine resources, the Russians managed to outflank the settlement of Novogrigorovka. We believe that in coming days, or maybe even today, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, as well as the Group of Forces East, will confirm Russian control over the territory and over this settlement. At the same time, we continue receiving different updates from the settlement by the name of Alexeyevka. I would like to remind you that during the previous days we got lots of reports both from pro-Russian and pro-Ukraine resources that the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to break through Ukrainian defense in this area and answer the settlement of Alexeyevka. The pro-Ukrainian resources were the first resources that adjusted their maps and that shown some gray zone in this area. And today, the pro-Ukraine resources published another article. This is the article, and here they provide us a picture, just a picture where we can see at least 4 Russian soldiers that were located exactly at this point. So based on this video, we have added this pocket, this island of Russian control. So we don't know for sure how exactly the Russians answered this territory. Either the Russians moved there from the south or the Russians answered the settlement from the east. As of now, it's unknown, but one thing we can see, one thing we know for sure, that most likely there are positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation on the territory of this settlement, one of the most important settlements in this direction. I would like to remind you that if Russians can consolidate their positions there, most likely they will be able to establish complete FPV and fire control over the river of Volcha that goes a bit further in the northern direction. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction. It seems that the defense of the city of Pokrovsk has collapsed completely, at least of its eastern part, but the problem is that if Ukrainians lose the southern part of the city of Pokrovsk, this is gonna lead to complete collapse of the entire defense operation of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. As of the morning of the 8th of October of 2025, today we start receiving first videos from the Pokrovskaya mine, which is located to the north of the settlement of Udachne. The pro-Ukraine resources published this video where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armed force of the Russian Federation in this area. So lots of episodes were published during this video, and most of these attacks took place exactly on the territory of the Pokrovskaya mine. And based on this video and based on the geolocation, we have adjusted the map. Now it seems that currently there are very heavy clashes for the territory of mine, and I would like to remind you that this is a strategical object. If Ukrainians lose control over the Pokrovskaya mine, then they would be forced to fall back in the northwestern direction towards the settlement of Sergeyevka, and the Russians from their side would be able to continue advancing further in the northeastern direction with the purpose to shorten the distance to the M30 road. And if Russians can establish physical control or a better FPV drone control over the road, Ukrainians will start suffering huge problems and huge logistic problems on the territory of the city of Pokrovsk. As for the city itself, during the previous 12 hours, neutral mappers and pro-Russian mappers clarified the situation along the line of combat contact. The Russians, according to different sources, secured completely the southern citadel of the city of Pokrovsk. The Russians managed to improve their positions in the western part of the city, and now the Russians are tasked to capture the central citadel. So the citadel of Pokrovsk is a very high, big construction that goes from the southern part of the city almost till the railways. So there is a one just big block of high-rise buildings, so of multi-storage buildings, that starts at the railway station and ends at the southern, let's say, part. So we see that the Russians secured the southern one, and now it's time for Russians to begin clashes for the central citadel. And as we can see, according to neutral mappers and according to pro-Russian resources, the armed force of the Russian Federation decided not to attack in this direction. The Russians decided to outflank Ukraine positions and to cut them from supply and support. And today we got several reports that the Russians began advancing from the southern citadel in the direction of the residential area of the city, which is located in the eastern part of the city. If Russians, as a result of this maneuver, as a result of this offensive operation, are able to establish control over this territory, most likely Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from this area, or otherwise they would be caught and cornered by Russians without any chances for evacuation. So the situation in this area remains tense, but it seems that everything is coming to the logical end. Ukrainians are retreating from the southern part of the city of Pokrovsk. We are waiting for geolocations that will allow us to start adding colors like red color or at least like yellow color. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of breakthrough. According to information we have, during the previous 12-24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. The Russians recaptured completely the settlement of Pankovka, which was recaptured earlier by Ukrainians during their counterattack. And now we start receiving reports that the Russians answered the settlement of Vladimirovka and that the Russians began recapturing positions on the territory of this village itself. The Russians destroyed the bridges that connected the settlement of Vladimirovka with the village of Shakhovo, so that is why we believe that Ukrainians will not show very strong resistance in this area and they would be forced to fall back in coming probably hours. Furthermore, the sources are saying that the Russians improved their positions on the western part of the settlement of Shakhovo itself, so we see that the Russians are tightening the news around the Shakhovo pocket, and it seems that Ukrainians will be forced to fall back from this area in coming days. Furthermore, the Russians got complete initiative in the northern part of breakthrough area, and the Russians began advancing further in the direction of the second defense line of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Donbas direction. Now let's talk about the city of Konstantinovka. During the previous 24 hours, 48 hours, the Russians managed to capture the settlement of Pritiechino completely. Today, the Ukrainian sources of 5th Assault Brigade published this video, and here we can see how Ukrainians with FPV drones were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the southwestern part of the settlement of Pritiechino. So based on this video, we have adjusted the map. The Russians managed to maintain the lines, as we can see, to shorten the lines, and now the Russians are consolidating their troops with the purpose to begin a major offensive operation in the direction of the southeastern part of the city of Konstantinovka itself. I believe that this offensive operation is going to start very soon, but right after the Russians finish and stabilize the situation to the north of the Kliban-Bytska water reservoir. So as soon as the Russians capture positions and capture everything along this red line, most likely the major battle, the major offensive operation on the city of Konstantinovka will begin. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the city of Siversk. According to information we have, the Russians captured one of the most powerful and the biggest strongholds in the southeastern part of the city of Siversk. So this video was published by pro-Ukraine resources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians in this point. So we came to the conclusion that either the Russians have already captured this stronghold, or currently there are very heavy clashes for this territory. This is a very important stronghold, the biggest one, and if Ukrainians lose control over this stronghold, they would be forced to fall back further in the direction of the city limits of Siversk, and from these positions the Russians will be able to advance further. One important thing, that if Russians continue offensive operation from this stronghold further in the northwestern direction, then the next battle is going to take already place on the territory of the city of Siversk itself. So the city of Siversk is surrounded by Russians from many directions, from the south, from the southeast, from the east, from the northeast, and from the north, and any other movement of the Russian troops in this area means that the Russians will enter the city limits of Siversk itself, and the real battle for this stronghold will begin. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.